The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is sponsored by Too Fat Lardies, Geek Nation Tours, and the generous donations of you, the listener. Thank you to everybody for your continued support. We really appreciate it. Meeples and Miniatures, episode 244. What a Tanker! With hosts Neil Shook, Mike Hobbs, and Mike Whittaker, and guests Richard Clarke and Nick Skinner from Too Fat Lardies. This show was recorded on the 7th of March, 2018. Hello and welcome to a very special edition of the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. On this episode of the show, I am joined, first off, by, it is the Welsh Wizard himself, it is Mr. Michael Hobbs. Hello, sir.
Hello. Are we doing this bit, are we?
Put it this way, I was thinking that I doubt, very much doubt, whether we could keep our guests down to an hour. So I thought, hey-ho, we'll just do the entire show.
We're going to do the whole show with our special guests.
Well,
this is news.
It's a special, but we'll just play it by ear.
It's a special Lardtastic Lardy episode. Well, hello, Meeps.
Indeed. Hello to our resident bard, Mr. Whittaker. Hello, how are you?
Oh, I've been promoted from bard troubadour to bard. Wonders will never cease. Evening, folks.
Well, after our last discussion, we've decided that we're becoming a dungeoneering party, aren't we?
I want to know who these next two are, though.
Yeah, that could be interesting. And on this show, we are joined by very special guests. It's a long time since we spoke to them. It is the Lords of Lard themselves. It is Mr. Richard Clarke, and for the first time, I believe, on the podcast, it is Mr. Nick Skinner. Hello, sirs.
Hello, hi.
Hello.
I don't often let him out.
It's not the first time either.
No, but people have tried to wipe it from their memory, Nick. Don't make it worse than it is.
Are you sure this isn't the first time you've actually been on our podcast?
Yeah, no, we did something a while ago in St Albans. I remember that you
yes,
had an after-game discussion.
That's it. Yes, we were all together. I do apologise. Yes, I was forgetting about that. I was thinking more in this kind of over the ether sort of thing. I was forgetting we actually kind of sat down and all talked together. Welcome both to the show. Nick and Rich obviously are guesting now. They are themselves podcasting celebrities.
No, I think you're thinking of Sydney.
Oh, indeed, Sydney is the celebrity. We are merely his minions.
And if people are not aware of what we're on about, you are missing out. So first off, guys, tell us, how on earth did the Lard Island come about?
Well, I've no idea. I can't remember. I think we had a conversation about it and said, "Shall we do a podcast?" Did we? I don't know. Nick, you might remember.
Well, you might remember. Some of you might have heard a podcast we did when we went to Salute a number of years ago, which was a one-off thing.
We did.
We shared our day out at Salute.
With the music from the famous Five, or Five Go Mad in Dorset, or whatever it was.
And we said after that we must do more of this because it was good fun. And then, of course, we never did it for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. And, of course, we decided that we wouldn't have me swearing as much because I was driving and getting lost in the East End. So we said, we'll leave the swearing out, Clarke, but we'll do the show.
So instead you have an episode where you're driving and getting lost in Holland?
Well, we did have one, yeah, funnily enough. Once we finished recording that bit, we turned the radio on, and it was Bonnie Tyler singing Lost in France, which was quite... We just dissolved into fits of laughter. We were actually lost in Belgium. and that was 15 minutes before we saw the giant Cyclops with giant bits at the side of the road. But it was. Somehow I always end up doing the driving, and somehow I always end up getting lost. And when I get lost, I tend to allow my feelings to come to the surface in a a less than genteel manner. But yeah, we tend to do podcasts and get lost wherever we go.
Excellent. So you're now up to, what's it, episode 7, are we now?
Seven, and I think we had a 2.5, so that might even be 8.
Yes.
I've not worked it out.
Yes, I did notice you slipped a 2.5 in there along the line. Because was it the 2.5? The 2.5 was the live from Crisis, and then obviously 3 was it? No, 4 was the Christmas show, wasn't it?
I have no idea. I just remember Sydney's costume and him playing with the band. I mean, I can't remember what number it was. It was. I was swept away by his musical talent.
Yeah, and talking about the band, Richard, we have actually invited Roger Barrowclough and his band to be here tonight.
No, but Roger told me he was out playing darts.
Yeah, unfortunately he can't make it because he's doing a bar mitzvah or something. But they have sent their drummer.
Yeah, well, Roger's a big part of the show, actually. You may know that the audience is rather more appreciative of Roger than he is of our show.
I'm just surprised at the amount of people you can actually squeeze live into Lard Island to listen to you guys.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, the biggest one, of course, was the Theatre Royal in Drury Lane, which was a Christmas one, and that was fortunate that Sydney was appearing there as Widow Twankey. The world's most famous pantomime spelling mistake. But so that was the biggest one we did, which I think was an audience of about 2,500 people. But normally we get about 875, I think, is the fire regulations here at Lard Island. But yeah, it's been good. Been nice to see people turning up and showing interest.
Brilliant stuff. Yeah, well, as I say, if people haven't listened to it yet, it is well worth catching on, because it's not. Although it says it's the Lardy Oddcast, it's not just about Lardy games. It's about the hobby, and you're discussing the hobby. You're discussing various aspects of it, and you're researching campaigns and scenarios, all sorts of stuff, aren't you? I mean, the range that you cover is pretty vast.
Yeah, Nick will have some comments on that, I'm sure. Nick.
We're trying to make sure that we talk about something meaty each time so that we can actually have something worth listening to and something powerful. So we talk about some things which have quite difficult conversations in the hobby. So some things that perhaps you might not like to talk about. For instance, we had a conversation about the use of swastikas in World War II games, which was something we thought long and hard about whether we should even talk about that, but we thought it was really important that we did. So we try to make sure we talk about at least one big issue each time, and we're very lucky that people send in recommendations and suggestions and questions through Twitter and email that we can then think about, okay, let's make this a topic for this time round. And Richard's always got an opinion on something, so it's not difficult to get the conversation going.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, actually, I was thinking about you, Neil, and View from the Veranda, because in our next edition of the Oddcast, we are actually going to talk about point systems.
Really?
I thought for one off there you said you were going to talk to Henry.
Yeah,
in case I need to block out about 6 hours for listening to the podcast.
No, God, I mean, we are merely new at podcasting. There's levels of superstardom that we have to work through before we get to Henry's level. I mean, we probably got to get through the Beatles and people like that before we get to that top level of higher deity that is Henry. But we're gonna talk about point systems, and we're gonna really give it a go and see what we think. So yeah, I think there's what we try and do is as Nick said, it's not about Too Fat Lardies. It's about people who are part of Too Fat Lardies talking about things that people who are fellow Lardies, if you like, have asked about, and we love the fact that we don't have to sit and think what we're going to talk about, because we're getting people saying, what about this? And sometimes, as Nick said, those subjects are like blindness. You know, I'd rather not talk about the use of a swastika, but it's really pertinent because I used a swastika in an illustration and didn't think anything of it, whereas people in other parts of Europe do think, and there are issues there to be discussed. So it's nice to respond to what people want to hear discussed. And it's been good fun, and the nice thing about it is it's been good fun, and we're going to get more people on. I mean, I've been talking to Dave Brown, who obviously Rise Wits Press, our sister company, publish his rules, and I want to talk to him about the way the hobby has changed from the big battles that he is, you know, absolutely the master of creating rules for. And are they still pertinent, and are people still going to be playing those games? That's a tough question to ask a guy who's, you know, spent his life writing rules for big battle war games. Are big battle war games still relevant to the hobby today? Because if we all look around at the type of games that we normally play, they don't necessarily represent it. So that's a conversation I'm really keen to have with him.
It's a relevant thing, isn't it? We were chatting with Mr. Berry, and on the Patreon bit of the show we ended up publishing was a part of a conversation that we had where Pete was talking about the blog post that he wrote last year about kind of the state of the hobby and this whole thing about big battle gaming versus skirmish gaming and different scales of figures and what is being presented by the hobby press as kind of this is wargaming standard, and where that isn't necessarily the case, and he was talking about that. It's a big subject at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's a real issue there. What the hobby press tell us is what the hobby is not necessarily what the hobby is at all. We certainly, Too Fat Lardies is an old and established, venerable company now, I suppose, but I can assure you that it took us at least 5 years before any hobby magazine mentioned anything that we were doing. And by that point in time, I Ain't Been Shot Mum was being played all around the globe. And you often think, okay, what I read in the hobby press is demonstrative of what's happening, but, well, they are merely reflecting the articles that are being presented to them. I mean, I know that certainly, Guy at WSS, who I write an occasional sort of column for, I talk to him a lot about the importance of going out and not just talking about what Arsenal and Chelsea and Manchester United are doing, but finding out what's happening down at Accrington Stanley level, because that is what's going to be happening at the top of the game in 5 years' time. And I know he puts a lot of effort into that, if nothing else, because I nag him to death about it. And I wrote one of my recent columns about the fact how it's important to give the oxygen of publicity to a lot of smaller companies who are coming through, because innovation is at the bottom. It's the small companies who are coming up with great innovative ideas, because if you are going to put figures if you're going to create plastic boxes of figures, it has got to be something that is going to appeal to a mass market. You are not going to do plastic boxes of figures for an obscure Venezuelan civil war in 1806. But it's the small innovative company who are going to be potentially doing those different periods, creating, different figures and different things. So it's really important that we have that focus, and we try and include a lot of that in the podcast.
And I think it's also a very interesting point for discussion. Actually, you might have hit at something we should be discussing next time round, which is the extent to which the wargaming press actually does reflect what we see around us as we game. People talk about social media, where people only present a certain side of their personalities. People only show what's really good about what they're doing on social media. It's quite interesting to see what you see in magazines and other war games press compared against what we actually see around us. Quite an interesting conversation to have that.
Mm-hmm. It is interesting how things have moved on. I mean, I remember at one point, miniature wargaming back when pre-Henry days, and there was a certain...
Ian Dickey.
Ian Dickey, that was it. Yeah, thank you. And there was a certain amount in what they displayed. There was a certain amount of what's the phrase? Normal person's wargaming going on. You know,
there was, and actually they were loud and proud about that. We don't want to present photographs of figures that make you go, I can never paint to that standard. Their argument was, we want to present you pictures of figures that make you think, hey, I can achieve that, I can do that. There's an argument to be had as to whether that was right or wrong, but they certainly were presenting pictures of figures that I think if I filled my dog up with paint and let him aim in the right direction, he could have got the similar effect.
yeah.
But I would never say that in public.
Right. Yeah, I mean, as you say, sometimes some of the pictures were a bit mixed. But having said that, it was a little bit more Wargaming for Mortals as opposed to the sort of thing we see. Now, you know, if your name happens to be, I don't know, let's pick a name out of thin air. Lieutenant Aristocracy, for example.
Yeah. Picking a name at random.
Picking a name at random. Now, you know, there's a chap. Nice that he is. He's so disgustingly talented.
Well, he did go to university and study fine art, so he's going to be pretty talented at this stuff.
Well,
I do have to say that when I was a young man in the 1980s, I would look at pictures in Wargames magazines and try and emulate the painting style of people, like Dallimore and people like that, and I would use those photographs as a reference material. So I don't think showing people what you can achieve is ever a negative thing. But maybe we should have a mix and show people, well, you can achieve this, but equally it's perfectly all right to achieve that. But as young Nicolas says, that's maybe a whole podcast in its own right, or an podcast. Yeah.
We're back to, does it pass the 2-foot test? Which is all I ever aspire to.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfectly legitimate thing. And to be really honest with you, I do my best, and I have to buy nowadays. I buy these sort of spectacles that ready readers at about 3.5 strength, so I can paint figures. And I put them on the table, and I can barely see where they are, so it almost doesn't matter.
Yes, we are people reaching that age, aren't we?
Well, yeah, quite. I've had a hard life.
Indeed. Anyway, I was just looking back, and it's been the last time we spoke to you chaps on the show. It was the 8th of December 2016, so it's been far too long since we've actually had you on the show. So I think the first thing we need to do is catch up with what Lardies have been up to in the past year.
Well, clearly wasting my money sponsoring your show because I've not been on it. Bum.
Hang on a second, Mitch. We have to break now for a quick advert about.
Oh yeah, I forgot that. Then.
Yeah.
And now a word from our sponsor.
It's always 6 inches.
6 inches, Sarge.
Yeah.
We've made you some sausages.
Yeah. Talking of which, can we have some new adverts?
Well, if only I had time.
Well, this is it. You see, these days.
It was the cast of thousands that we managed to assemble for those ones, and we've never quite got them back. It's a bit like the Pythons, we've never got them back in the same place together at the same time.
Can we get Sid to do one? We have to get Sid to do a. Whilst you listen to this, why don't you listen to a proper podcast? Go to the podcast.
Well, it's an interesting approach, I suppose. But to be honest, it would be nice if people listen to both, Mike.
Well, of course. I mean, they can listen to both of it. But it'd be nice to have Sid just pop into ours now and again.
Yeah, well,
that's some class.
Yeah.
Those leather trousers are high maintenance. You have to keep applying the balm. Yeah. Otherwise, it's a bit of a sort of PJ Proby experience. Which is
have to wear them.
Anybody over 65. Yeah, what's been happening? Well, Nicholas, we've been busy, haven't we, mate?
Well, we have been busy. I know we're going to talk about our latest release very soon. And so you said it was December 2016 when we last spoke to you. That's quite interesting because it was over that Christmas, actually, that we had the idea for our new release. So maybe that conversation sparked something for us.
Yeah, a boycott. Yeah, it was, and actually, the first time we had it out on display was at Penarth at the show there in January 2017. What's the Penarth show called, Mike? Crusade.
Crusade. Yeah.
Crusade. Yeah.
Took it
That was a
there
brilliant show. I missed it this year because I accidentally double booked because I hadn't bought my wall year planner, and so I missed it. Unfortunately, I booked something else. But great show, and we had the rules on display there for the first time, and we had a great time. I mean, that was a fabulous day out. It was good fun. And Mike, have you still got that badge we made for you?
Well, the one that said I'm a complete. What was it?
No, it said celebrity wargamer.
Oh, that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I've got it mounted on the wall here.
But yeah, so that was. We started working on Water Tanker then, and it's that's been a focus of a lot of our attention over the last year. But we've been doing loads of stuff as well because obviously we have got Chain of Command, which is going great guns. We've been producing a lot of pint-sized campaigns for that, which have been fabulous, and people have been loving them. And we are now just about at the point where we're going to start rolling out the handbooks for that because we want to start. What we did when we first produced Chain of Command, the idea was very much that it was going to be a collective effort and a sort of Socratic process where we all work together to produce army lists, and we did produce a huge number of sort of free, or a large number, not huge, that'd be ridiculous to claim it was huge, but it was large number of free downloads. So if you wanted to do the 8th Army, there you go, you download it from the website. If you want to do the Africa Corps, you download it. If you want to do the Belgians in 1940, but basically what we were doing was we were producing the standard. Here's a Belgian army standard platoon. Here's a French army standard platoon. And there's loads and loads more exciting units that we obviously glossed over in trying to get as much information out as quickly as possible to people. And one of the things that we're now on the verge of doing is producing our first handbook, which is the 1940 handbook, which is going to give you loads and loads of army lists for Belgians, for Holland, for the French, for the British and the BEF. We've got Danes in there. We've obviously, funnily enough, got the Germans. You started it. We're not covering the Norwegians in that because I really want to do a separate little campaign book which is going to cover Norway in 1940. So that's going to be the first of the Chain of Command handbooks, which is coming out. We've also got the I Ain't Been Shot Mum supplements, which we've now started rolling out once a month. A couple of months ago, we produced France from 1940, which Robert Avery has been working on. And actually, I'm almost embarrassed to sell them as I Ain't Been Shot Mum products because they are fantastic reference works for anybody who is looking to wargame at company level in that period. The way he breaks down every individual division in the BEF, for example, examining how the nuances and subtleties of the way they are organised. That's fantastic. So we produced the French in February. We produced the BEF, the British, in March, 1st of March. We got the Belgians and Dutch going forward with that next month. So that's great. And of course, we've also produced the Swamp Fox supplement for Sharp Practice, which not only has it been well received and people have enjoyed it, but I have kind of gone mad painting a load of AWI stuff and running a campaign from that, which has been great fun. But Nick, you've been really busy as well with with your nautical fun, haven't you?
Well, we've been doing some things around how we might expand shark practice to include having fun in boats.
Yeah.
And that's been a bit of hard work on a developmental aspect, because it's quite difficult to take the kind of figure scales that we're looking at in shark practice and squeezing figures down to fit on a boat deck, and then try to make sense of that in terms of gaming. So that's been quite hard. So I think we've got a way to go with that, but it's making progress, and we've been distracted from that, from what we've been working on most recently, which we'll talk about later, but we will come back to that.
What about smugglers, though? What about the smugglers?
Smuggling fun as well. We've been adapting shark practice to use with smugglers, which is an interesting campaign aspect, where potentially the tabletop game almost plays it secondary. If you're a smuggler and you end up combating the customs forces, then you're kind of onto a loser. But there's lots of things you can do on a campaign basis to grow your notoriety as a smuggler, and that's been quite fun to do too. So we're hoping that will work its way out at some point too. There's one other thing we need to say about, which was also when I managed to get rid of Richard for some of the year. We sent him over to Belfast.
Yes, I was about to say, Richard is now not only star of radio and star of print, but he's now star of film.
He is, yeah. So we sent him over to Belfast and tried to change the locks while he was away, but he still got back in the building, and he had some good fun over there, filming various videos for Chain of Command and Shark Practice, which
with Base of War.
And they've been really well received, and they're good fun to do as well. I think, Rich, wasn't it?
It was not my first time on the silver screen, I should mention. I was actually in Quadrophenia.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But, when he jumps off the balcony?
Yeah.
I was in the crowd. I got paid 15 quid for that.
Did he land on you?
No, that's why I'm still 6'5". Yeah, a long time ago. Yeah, I was on holiday, and a mate in the pub said, "We're filming something. Do you want to come along?" He didn't talk like that. I don't know why I said that, and we did. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, no. More importantly, hopefully I'll earn more than 15 quid out of being on Beast of War. But it went on that. It was great. Actually, it was really good fun. What I really enjoyed about it was just exposing myself to a different audience, as I said to the magistrate. But
as I say, that's the big thing, isn't it? Because obviously the Beast of War audience is completely different to the people who would normally come across Too Fat Lardies, wouldn't they?
Yeah, totally. And that's what's kind of interesting about the way the hobby has evolved. If I go back 25 years ago, if we were wargamers 25 years ago, and we walked into a pub and we'd go, "Oh, what has Stuart Asquith got to say in his column this month?" And we would talk about that. And going back to what we were talking about what is in the magazine. What was in the magazine was what we believed was what was happening in wargaming, because we all bought Wargames Illustrated, Miniature Wargames, whatever the magazines were, Battle for Wargamer, if you really want to go back into the dark, distant mist time. And that was our only real contact with wargaming, other than people in our local club, or people not even in the friendly local game store, because there weren't any. There wasn't even Games Workshop, if we go back to the 80s, really. They were just kicking off. And so we were all dining from the same table, whereas nowadays we're all experiencing our hobby in different fashions. So people at my age will probably still be picking up the magazines every month, as I do, and subscribing to them, as I do, and sitting down and reading them. But a lot of young people just aren't doing that. What they're doing is they're watching podcasts, they're watching videos on YouTube, they're consuming their hobby in a totally different manner. And I felt one of the things that we were failing to do, actually, was to address the 30-something guy girl, whatever, who had been playing Games Workshop games, had come through that route, had done the usual thing, get married, have kids, whatever, get involved in a career, whatever you get busy with, and then at 30-something emerge from that and go, I wouldn't mind a go at that again. But obviously they don't want to go down and play with a load of 13-year-olds in the local store. So they look potentially for something else. And I felt that was an audience that we weren't addressing. And talking and dealing with Beasts of War, I have felt has been really, really positive, because if nothing else, just talking to the guys at Beasts of War, they're 20 years younger than me. They're informing me of what is happening in the hobby. And it's such a big hobby. I mean, Neil, you have been very focused this is not a miniature wargaming podcast. This is, Meeples and miniatures. So this is board gaming and this is miniature gaming, but there's also a huge crossover between the two. And that's something that people of my generation have traditionally not really been involved in, interested in, or whatever. Well, I really am interested. I mean, a lot of the game mechanisms that you see in our rules are not dissimilar to game mechanisms that you would see in board games. And it's, we've often had a conversation about how interesting it is that in board games are becoming more sophisticated and more nuanced and subtle and clever and interesting. And yet in figure games, in many ways, we seem to be going, it's a race to the bottom to make something that's more and more simplistic, so that people don't have to think about it. And the argument is always, well, he's had a long day at work, and when he gets in, he wants to play something really, really simple, and he doesn't want to think about his chain of command dice, because that might involve 2 brain cells. I'm not convinced of that at all. I think it's a word that I would say on the oddcast, but in respect to you, I won't say here, Nate. But in French, it sounds something like boulot, with an X at the end. There we are. So it was great experience going over there. And in fact, young Nicolas and I are taking the flight over there in the next couple of weeks to go and do a bit more filming with our latest release, aren't we, Nick?
We are. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Do I need sandwiches? He said. I said, no, but you need a passport.
It was very clear from watching those games that your principal opponent got it.
Oh, yeah.
He did, didn't he? Very much.
Honestly, I have never, ever come across a gamer more switched on than Jason. He's, apart from the fact he's a really nice bloke, and he and I both have a background in the construction industry, so we talked about things like the scaffolding and, bricks and whatever. But apart from that, you just think, this bloke has never played this before, and he's absolutely rubbing my face in it. But that's part of the fun, and I like to say that I let him win. Sorry, that wasn't very convincing, was it? I shouldn't have.
I've seen you handle armour, and I ain't been shooting games, so I'm not commenting.
That's only because your mate told me the map was the other way up.
In fact, I'd say that's a great reason
Carl
to
has
go.
never lived that one down.
No, quite.
The direction of the compass rose is marked in capitals on every
I
scenario.
would not have led with flail tanks if I'd realised that the mines didn't start for another 3 foot.
We believe you, Clarke. We believe you.
But it was funny, wasn't it? Yeah, good day out that was.
I would say to anybody actually that if they want to see Richard get his backside kicked, it's worth going to the Beasts of War site to watch those, even if you have no intention of playing the game.
Absolutely, and they're
just
also
enjoy the fun of seeing him get hammered.
Yeah, and
only that I found they renewed my enthusiasm for both sharp practice and chain of command.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, it was interesting because we were there for a fairly intense. I got the ferry over and landed on Sunday night, landed on Monday morning, drove over to Coleraine, which is on the border of County Londonderry and County Antrim. I'm not sure which one it's in. And smashing time there, lovely guys. And I came back on the Friday. And 1 minute I'm playing sharp practice, the next minute I'm playing chain of command. And I think at sometimes the rules got a bit blurred between which was which. But what was great about it was that when Justin and I we did the microphone checks, and those guys are very, very professional. I mean, they really are, on the money with setting up the cameras and everything. And then, but once the game started, we were just two mates having a game, and it was great fun. And we came out at the end of it sort of thinking, oh, blimey, from a sales and marketing point of view, that probably was a complete disaster, because I should have been explaining this, that, and the other, and doing this, that, and the other. And I didn't do that. We just got on and played a game. And
clearly, if you look at some of the comments on the YouTube videos, whatever you did worked.
Well, that was the funny thing. On the way back on the ferry, and I'm thinking, oh my Lord, I've really messed up there. And then as we came out, a lot of people said, wow, that seemed really honest and genuine and looked like two guys just having a good laugh. And I thought, oh, thank goodness for that, because people could have gone, good Lord, that Richard Clarke's not very professional, which they may have a point about. Ultimately, I'm not the managing director of a big wargaming conglomerate. I'm just a wargamer. So if I come across as enthusiastic, it's because I'm enjoying the game, and that's all.
So you mentioned a few times that you're going back there.
Yeah.
I'm taking Nick, which is going to be a mistake.
Yeah, I've had all my injections and I'm ready to go.
I can't see anything going wrong there. So you're going there to show them a new game, I understand.
We are, Mike. We are. What a tanker.
Oh, there's no need for that sort of language.
Oh, if only my drum kit were available. But yeah. What's a tanker? Yeah. The most exciting and fun game of tank warfare in World War II that you are ever going to play would be my claim to that. And do you know what? I never boast about the games that we produced, but I can boast about this one because my little fat friend Nicholas developed this one, and I think it's an absolutely fantastic game. I really, really have enjoyed it. And what I feel really proud about is that we've kept it lean and mean and trim and exciting. And, a lot of people talk about Lardy games and they talk about the emphasis on history and so on and so forth. And sometimes you feel that in order to try and live up to people's expectations in terms of creating a historical game, you need to add a lot of historical detail in. When actually, funnily enough, we came to the conclusion that actually by keeping it as clean and tidy as possible and introducing historical benefits and bonuses only where they were most important, really allowed us to create a game that was not only great fun, but also, has quite a degree of historical plausibility. Nick, I'm stealing your thunder here, mate. You jump in.
You're doing very well. I love the fact that you described. Was it me you described as lean, mean, trim, and exciting? Or was that rules?
No, that was a tank.
Okay. That was Well, it was. As Neil suggested. I mean, it's been great fun to do. Neil said earlier on that it was Christmas 2016, and that's when the game was born, really, over that break, over the Christmas break. And I was just turning around some ideas. Yeah, and I was just playing with some ideas around dice and seeing how the game worked out. And I wasn't thinking initially that we would be using it for tanks, but I had a thought in my head about Chain of Command. And Chain of Command being great fun, as we know, but tanks are the support option in Chain of Command, and they appear and they come on as your support, and they appear like your dragon in a fantasy game, I guess. Your big dragon comes on and it shoots fire at the other dragon, and they blow each other up, and that's the end of them. But I thought there must be more to tanks than this, so we developed an idea where we could actually move the topic of the game into the tank itself and take away all the bits and pieces around the outside. So this game, for instance, doesn't include any infantry or anti-tank activity. It's purely tank-on-tank action. And it's been jolly good fun to do. We took it to Penarth in 2017, where a Wargame celebrity on this podcast played it, and we had great fun. And what was great particularly about the game that we took there was that we played it with gamers of all ages. I don't think it would be offending anybody to say we had some guys there who were
Old Gits.
Who were old gits, and we had a
Hello.
very smart young lad who was there as well, who
We
played
did.
it with his dad,
That
who
was
who soon worked out exactly what he needed to do to get the best tank in the best situation. It's really good to see. Do you want to say something about that, Rich?
I really do. That was so funny. There was a little lad there, and he had his Welsh rugby shirt on, which is always great to see. And I said to him, "What do you want to be? What side would you like to be? Would you like to be the heroic British, or would you like to be the evil Nazis?" And he looked at me, and he was thinking about it. And I said, "There's nothing to think about, surely." He said, "No," he said, "but the German tanks are cool." I thought, okay, brilliant. You know, it was fabulous to see, actually, interestingly, that if you, one of the things that often people say to us is, "Oh, your games are so different. There's a bit of a learning curve to get into them because we played stuff that we're really used to before. And when we come to your game, we have to kind of do a brain dump of the stuff we've done before and then relearn it." Whereas you get a youngster like that, and he was 8, 9, 10 maybe. He obviously had none of that preconceived baggage, and he just jumped on it, and he was the star of the show, wasn't he, in that game? It was brilliant to see. He just picked it up like that. Fantastic.
Yeah, he shot me.
You
Gave him a firefly.
Well, one of the things you'll find if you play What a Tanker is that actually, you know, games can be really very quick, and that's one of the major things that we love about it is that you can get your tanks out and play a game of What a Tanker, and it could be that your own tank gets blown up in the first 10 minutes, but you're playing again in a different game 5 minutes after that. So it can be really fast paced. And when we played it at Penarth, I don't know how many games we played during the course of that day. A high number.
I would say that a game normally lasts about an hour.
Yeah.
And if you get a huge game, it lasts longer. And of course, there's options like the King of the Ring option, which, you know, if you get blown up, well, you're effectively in the sin bin in rugby terms, because every time the turn ends, we roll a dice and see whether you come back on as a reinforcement. So it's almost like a sort of rolling game that you could play with your club mates all day. You know, let's say you had a club game Saturday. Who's the biggest tanker in Penarth? Which I think was the strap line we used on the day, and you could literally play all day and see who ended the day maybe getting to ace status, or who gets the most kill rings to do whatever. It's just, I mean, it's an interesting one, because I think it would be fair to say that it's a fabulously fun game, but it's a bit like one of our Lardy Christmas games. You wouldn't want to do it every week, but if you've got a special event, if you've got, you know, one of the lads' birthday, or you've got, you know, it's a Christmas game, or you're going to have a weekend game, this is going to be a fabulous game to roll out where everybody takes command of their own tank. And if, you know, you can have a table. I mean, we normally play 6x4 table here at Lard Island, because one of the things we try and make sure is we have a 6x4 table here to design games on, because we know that's what people are going to be playing on at home. There's no point in us having a 20-foot by whatever table. So we normally play 3-4 tanks aside on our 6x4 table here. But if you've got a club game with 20 people, you know, you might want to enlarge that to, you know, 20-foot by 6-foot or 8-foot or whatever, and have a real, you know, let your imagination run riot. And it's when you have that, everybody gets their own tank, and yes, you're on the same side as him, but really you are trying to keep your own tank crew alive through the whole sort of day of gaming, which is almost a campaign, if you like. And sometimes, you know, your mate is crying for help, but you think, hold on a minute, I've got 4 kill rings. One more, I'm going to be an ace. Do I want to risk it, or am I going to hang back? And that's the situation, actually, where you get the rookie tanker, the raw tanker. He's got no kill rings. He's got nothing to prove. He's going to zoom into the action and try and make a name for himself. So the game is, you know, it's quite subtle and nuanced in that respect, that just the psychology of the game, because it's based on making progress as you get in, a bit like a video game. You know, I've got to level 2. So now I unlock these treasures, and now I'm going to really try hard to get level 3. So it creates its own pressures, because you think, well, I've achieved this much. I don't want to lose it and go back to square one.
So Nick, as you wrote the thing, do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the mechanics?
No, it's trade secret.
The problem is,
No.
the problem is, we were talking about this. It's so simple. If we tell you it all, we won't sell any. But anyway, carry on, Skinner.
Well, I guess it works on a couple of levels. The idea is that you can do this in two ways. You can play a one-off game, you versus a mate, and you can both get a tank out, put it on. All you need for this is one tank each and a bit of terrain. So there is, very, very low barriers to entry, if you like, to take this game on. Anybody who plays World War II is going to have a tank. The great thing about What a Tanker is that actually it doesn't matter what scale you use, because the rules are exactly the same, whatever the scale. All we say is you change inches to centimetres if you're going the tiny tanks. But actually, range doesn't matter, because you're engaging in tank combat, and tanks can shoot at such a distance that therefore on the table it doesn't really matter. We don't really take range into it at all. So it's like you can get one tank versus one tank. So you and I would roll up, we put our tanks on the table, and we would play a game, and you would blow me up, and then we could start again. And that might take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, depending on how cagey it is. You can roll it out where you play a multiple player game. So there could be 6 of you playing, and each of you would have your own tank. And you'd have 3 on one side and 3 on the other, probably, although you could balance that, for instance. So if you wanted to do a tiger hunt like we did the other day, for instance, we had 4 players playing, and we had one guy playing a Tiger 1, and 3 other guys had Cromwells, weren't they? And that gave a really interesting game, because it's quite scary to be the one guy who's facing down the tiger and trying to be cool, while your chums are supposed to be going around his flanks and taking him out for you. You can see it's sort of squeaky bum time for some of the players when they're caught in the tiger's headlights.
Actually, can I just jump in there? That was a really, really interesting game, because if you just take that, a standard point system, which there is in the rules, 3 Cromwells should beat a tiger every time, right? Because the point system tells you it's better. And in fact, they did. They did beat the tiger. In the end, the tiger it's a bit like the tank that's in the Imperial War, not the Imperial War Museum, the Tank Museum. It just got hit and took so much damage that in the end the crew jumped out. But the funny thing was, watching the players in the Cromwells moan about it, we can't take that out, it's so scary. and it was their own preconceived ideas about, it's highly unlikely that you're going to put a round into it that's going to blow it up, but you've got to work together. You've got to try and work round its flanks. You've got to try and take advantage of the fact that it's got a slow rotating turret, and you can probably get out of its angle of fire, and you've got to work together to get that end kill. But the psychology of it was quite interesting to watch, wasn't it, Nick?
Yeah, it was. It's very interesting, and that
it's
one of those moments where you see actually the game becomes it's a bit more historical, a bit more psychological about this. It's really
big time.
To see that. Yeah.
I did something similar in I Ain't Been Shot One with a top 8 in a Tiger 1 against 10 Shermans. That was interesting for very similar reasons.
Yeah.
Well, you could do that. You could do that in What a Tanker for sure. So, an ace in a tiger would certainly take some knocking out. But then again, you've only got to put a couple of lucky shots in, and you can do it. It's somebody took out Wittmann eventually, so it's all doable.
I think he was in an aeroplane.
No, he wasn't. No, he was taken out by tanks, wasn't he? Wittmann?
Was he? I can't remember. I mean, there's a lot of debate about it, wasn't there?
Who did it? Yeah, that's right. It was.
Well, it wasn't me, and it wasn't you.
Quite a few people have claimed him, I think. But so let me go back to describing the game. So we will play a game. Let's say we had 3 players on each side. We would choose our tanks. Now, we can choose our tanks from the availability of what we've got in our toy boxes, so we can just get those out and play them because we want to, or we can try and structure our forces using some kind of historical precedent. So what we've got within the rules, for instance, is the idea of a tanker table. So if I wanted to play an American tank commander in 1944, and I was having my first game, I would choose my entry-level tank. And my entry-level tank for a 1944 American tank commander is going to be an M4 Sherman. So I go into my first action with my M4 Sherman. I haven't got any kills to my name. I go into action. I've just come off the beach at Utah or whatever, and I'm going inland, and my chums are there, and we're about to engage our first enemy. So we have that battle. And the way the battle works is that we would, assuming we're all raw crews and we're coming into our first action, we would roll for initiative. We'd see who has the initiative, and therefore who has the initiative has the option of going first. So the idea is that each tank activates in accordance to the initiative sequence that we set in that very first phase of the turn. So I know who's going to go first, I know who's going to go second, I know who's going to go third, I know who's going to go fourth, and play will move from one tank to tank. And when each tank activates, the tank commander will roll a handful of dice, and those scores on that dice enable him to do stuff. For instance, if I roll a 1, I roll a handful of dice. I'm rolling 6 dice for my tank, okay? All tank will have 6 dice. I roll a handful of dice. If I roll a 1, I can move. So that enables me to take some movement on the table. I can move my tank so many inches. And if I have more than one, then maybe I can move again. So I can move twice. And I can use my dice in any sequence that I wish. So if I just run really quickly through what the dice enable you to do, if I roll a 1, I can move or I can turn around. And obviously, if I'm a light tank, I might be able to go faster than if I'm a heavy, slow tank. If I roll a 2 is a really interesting result because 2 allows me to potentially acquire a target. Now, acquiring a target is not the same as spotting a tank. We are gamers. We're standing there next to the table. We can see all the tanks laid out in front of us. We know where they are. But acquiring the target is something different. The acquisition of the target is where the team who are in the tank are focusing on their selected enemy. So they're saying, right, there's a Panzer IV over there behind that hedge. He is now, I'm going to try and acquire him as a target. And depending on how well camouflaged he is, in other words, how much intervening terrain there is between me and him, depends how many of those number 2s I might need to spot him. And so if I'm lucky, he'll be in the open, and therefore I will see him almost instantly. And there's another couple of things that affect this, including whether the tank commander has got his head in the turret or out the turret, and we can come back to that if we need to. But basically, I acquire the target. So I've moved. Let's imagine I've moved up. I've acquired the target. I've seen him now, which means that my gunner is now starting to lay up on this guy. So that's the 1 and the 2. On a 3, I can aim. So I need a 3 to be able to aim at this guy. And that's simply done. All I do is I take my 3 and I say, I've acquired the target. I'm now aiming at him. If I have a 4, I can now shoot at him. And that means that I fire 1 round of AP. Now, we don't designate between different, we don't, what's the word? We don't worry about different types of AP. We just keep it simple. I'm firing AP. I'm a piercing shell at that tank. And I shoot.
Yeah, effectively, the factors that we've got reflect the normal type of ammunition for that phase of the war. So, you know, this is not a game about millimeters of armor and what type of round you're firing. This is a game about people, the crew in that tank, and how effectively they're working together, isn't it?
Yeah, it's exactly that. And so I can shoot on a 4, and if I roll a 5, I can reload. So if I'm lucky, I can move, acquire a target, aim at him, shoot at him, and then reload afterwards. So that's my first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 6 dice, if I roll a 6, we have something called a wild card. So the 6 means that I can substitute it for other dice that I might not have rolled. So if I didn't roll a 4 and I need one to shoot, I can turn that 6 into a 4. And there are various different options that you can do with that 6. So I can use it to shoot more effectively, or I can say, actually, I'm going to hold back on it, because if I hit him, maybe I'll use my 6 to put that in to do more damage on him, or maybe I'll use it to recover some damage that I previously incurred. So if I'm rolling my handful of dice, rolling my 6 dice, and I'm using those dice to activate my tank in whatever sequence I like. So if I want to, I can shoot and then move afterwards. The way I do it doesn't matter, and then that's my activation completed, and the play will then shift to the next player down the line. The other aspect of it, I guess, is the way that tanks take damage. So I have 6 dice in my hand. If I'm commanding that Panzer IV, Sherman has rolled over to me and he's hit me, then potentially there could be 3 outcomes. The first outcome is that the shell will harmlessly bounce off and there'll be no damage done. The second option is that actually he does some temporary damage to me. So this is the fact that a rather large round of ammunition has just pinged off me, or done some damage inside the tank, and somebody's wounded, or is taken out momentarily. I'd lose some dice through temporary damage. So you might shoot at me and I lose 1 dice through temporary damage. Another guy might shoot at me and I lose another dice through temporary damage. Another guy might shoot and I lose another one. So I've got 6 dice in my hand, but as I take damage, I will lose those dice either on a temporary basis, or if the hit is substantial enough, I'll lose that dice permanently. And the object of the game is that you reduce your enemy tank to 0 dice. Now, if you reduce him to 0 dice, you can do that in 2 ways. You can do it through an accumulation of permanent and temporary damage, which basically means that the enemy tank crew bails out because their tank is no longer operable. For instance, they might have had a jammed turret, or you might you might damage their maneuvering capability, and the crew decide to bail out. Or it could be that you've actually blown them up. And therefore, that's a pretty bad outcome. The difference between the outcomes is important, because if you're playing a career game, if you get your tank destroyed and blown up, then you lose your crew as well. Whereas if your crew bails out, what happens is you go back to the depot and you can get in a new tank. And that enables you to come back into the next game with the same number of accumulated kills that you've already got. The idea is that you can kill tanks. By killing tanks, I get kill rings. You know, the rings that the German Panzer aces would paint on their barrels. The idea is that you get kills and you become an ace tanker. And when you become an ace tanker, you can upgrade to the next tank up in the chain. So instead of being a Sherman, you can become a Sherman Easy 8 in your next game.
But more importantly, en route, what do points make?
Prizes.
Yeah, and so as you go on, before you get to ace status, every kill ring that... So let's say I have a fantastic game and I shoot up 2 Shermans in this game. So at the end of it, I'm awarded 2 kill rings to paint on my barrel. And Nick, what happens in the next game?
So in the next game, you will receive 2 random cards from the deck, from the bonus deck. And there's a small bonus deck of cards, and they will give you certain attributes that you can play at any time in that turn. So, for instance, one of the cards is called Hell Driving. So Hell Driving means that I can play this card at any point in any point in the entire turn. So even if it's your go, I can play my Hell Driving card, and that will enable me to move my tank. So it may be that when you've lined me up for a great shot, I can play Hell Driving and suddenly skittle off behind a building.
Yeah, reverse out cover. Yeah.
So, and
that card's fun.
And then that card is exactly right. That card is then burnt, and I've played it for that game. So there are various combinations. Some of them affect movement. Some of them affect the ability of your enemy to spot you. For instance, one of the attributes is called Hot Tracer. So we know that tanks used Tracer as a way to mark their target. So if I've lined up on an enemy tank, I can play my Hot Tracer card, and what that means is it makes it easier for you, my colleague, my teammate, it makes it easier for you to acquire the same target because I'm lighting him up effectively.
Nice. So it sounds like a nice, simple game. We've got some nice resource management there with the use of the dice, because obviously you're never going to roll the dice that you actually need to do what you want to do at the time you want to do it.
No, that's right. I mean, it's by far the simplest game we've ever played. The most amazing thing about it was when we rolled it out last January and we played it, we said, well, bloody hell, that's done. What else do we need to do? It's a really nice, simple mechanism. And the last year has been spent thinking about how we wanted the game to develop. Did we want to go down the detailed historic route and make it a really tight simulation of the sweaty nature of tank combat? Or did we want to make it more of a game that could just be fun and played and be fast and furious? And what we've come up with now is something that kind of fits nicely in the two. If you know the film Fury, and you know that famous sequence of the Tiger tank taking on those 3 Shermans, if you want to play that, this is the way to do it. It will allow you to play that game. I'm not saying you get the same outcome, but you can actually play that game with these rules, no problem.
I think what's interesting and important is from a game design point of view. We originally thought, right, let's add lots of historical detail, let's add lots of this, that, and the other. And the more we added, the more it actually became less historical, because it's about important decision making. It's about how you manage your crew within that tank, rather than about millimeters of armor. And obviously, I mean, we have produced lists for all the different tanks. I mean, one of the things we were very, very keen on was to produce not just 1944, 1945. So, for example, you could, using the campaign system, start off driving a Panzer IIB in France in 1940 and follow your career to its sort of ultimate end in Berlin in 1945 as an ace in a King Tiger. And so, and at every point in between, follow on. Or, let's say, for example, that we got together and decided, hey, I really fancy playing Barbarossa. There we go. There's the list. There's the 1941 level entry tanks. And there are the levels above where you can go to when you get promoted. Because the key to the game is, as well as having a good fun system for actually playing armored combat, there is a campaign system which allows you to, once you've established yourself, let's say, for example, in a Sherman in 1944, and you've got 5 kills, you can then get promoted to a something like a 76mm Sherman, or you can take one of Easy 8 or whatever the other options are on the next list up. So the lists are there. You choose what you want to do. You might say, "Hey, I really fancy going in a Hellcat tank destroyer, just to do something different." So you can do that. I think it's the fun of the game is that you can follow your career, and that's I think gives it real replayability, and that's important in games. You want to get to that point in that first game where you've got 4 kills, you only need 1 more to become an ace, and you're going to go to your mates, let's do this next week, because I want to become an ace. But of course, once you become an ace, you get promoted. You go from let's say your Panzer IV to your Panther, let's say, for example. You start again because you're on a new tank. You've been transferred to a new unit with Panthers, or you're just newly equipped with Panthers, and you're going to have to go through that same process. Yeah, you've got a better tank, but all those bonus cards that you had when you were 3-4 kills into being a Panzer IV commander, they've gone now. So you're really trying to build that up again. So you, as a player, have an affinity with your crew. If only on the basis you don't want them to get killed because you worked hard to get that kind of reputation as an ace, or and get those bonus cards.
Yeah, and we've got tanker tables in the rules for all the main belligerents. So we've got the Germans are in there, obviously, with all their main armor. We've got the Russians are in there, the Americans are in there, the British are in there. Lend-Lease are all in there under the Russians as well. So under the Russian list, for instance, you could be driving a Churchill or obviously depending on your model availability, I guess it's the only thing restricting you, but you could be driving a Valentine 1 week, and then through a number of kills you could end up driving a a bloody great 152. Through as Richard says. So they're
Although
all there.
you-
We've even got the French. Even the French and the Japanese are in there as well, and the Italians too. If you want to go down that route, they're all in there, and the stats are in there for all those tanks.
And it says, if you start off as a French player, right, okay, you use the French list for 1940, use the British list for 41, you've joined the Free French. Use the American list for 44, you're still in the Free French, but you've got a slightly different sponsor. So it's all in there. It's all there.
Yeah.
That sounds really interesting. I mean, I played some of the early versions. You did say earlier that you've stripped it back and you haven't got any AT or infantry in there now. So it is just a pure
That's
tank
right.
game.
Yeah, we decided to focus purely on tanks. We wanted to keep it as a tank-on-tank action.
Yeah.
Now, there's no, who knows what the future will bring, but at the moment, we're just focusing on tanks for it. We didn't want to confuse it by putting the infantry and anti-tank alongside it, because funnily enough, there's already a rule set called Chain of Command if you want to do that, and that works really well for fighting combined arms.
Yeah.
The focus on this is very much about tank-on-tank action.
No, that would be good.
It's just fun. I mean, the important thing, whilst we kind of, the side effect of fun was, there's lots of historical nuances in there because of, we are interested in history, but we just wanted a game where you roll your tanks out and have great fun with it. As I said earlier, I'm not suggesting that this is a game that you want to play every week, but my God, as a bit of a sort of, roustabout, bit of a beano with your mates, playing a really good fun game where everybody in the club can get involved, or you could do your local game store, get everybody to come down with their one tank. It's the entry barrier is almost zip. As a convention or show game, this is almost perfect. It's just a great fun game, and sometimes you just, that's what you want.
And we'll be taking it to Salute. Talking about convention games, we'll be playing this at Salute.
Pretty well.
That'd be good. I mean, to me, it sounds like a sort of game that if you got on your club and you have a game of Chain of Command or maybe Shotman or one of the other World War II games, and you finish that off, but your table's still set up.
Yeah.
Before
So as you know, Mike, we've got the Operation Market Larden coming up in June, and I said to the organisers of that, I said, look, we're going to bring Water Tanker. There's some great Lardy games on display that day, all day. We can run Water Tanker at lunchtime just for a bit of fun. If anybody wants to do something around tanks, the game's really quick, a bit of a giggle, and get some good laughs going.
And actually, I did that at Durham last year. We a War Lard. I probably didn't pronounce that very well, but at the Durham Lardy game show last year, I ran it out at lunchtime. We just put the tanks on whatever table there was and had a bit of fun showing the lads how it was going to work. And the great thing is, a guy contacted me. The number of people that have said on Facebook, I played this at Penarth, or I saw this at Durham, and you think, blimey, was it that memorable? And that's that. But it's good that people really feel like that.
I think also because we played a lot of games, the throughput of players was quite high. So normally, if you're at a convention, you might play one game in the afternoon, one game in the morning. With Water Tanker, we were playing probably 8 or 10 games. So you're getting a greater throughput of players as well, which from a participation and demonstration game perspective is fantastic. Really, really good.
And who would turn up a chance to have a sticker saying, I'm a bit of a tanker?
Again, it has been claimed.
Indeed.
I thought you were the complete tanker, Mike.
I'm both.
Couple of questions. Now, obviously, you guys have been playing Water Tanker in 28mm.
Yeah.
Is it scale independent?
No,
you can play it whatever scale you like.
15 as well.
Can you play it with tanks with bases, though, Rich? That's the big question we have to ask.
No, tanks with bases are obscene and should not be allowed.
Yeah. Well, it's been lovely chatting to you, Rich, but we have to finish now.
That's right. Yeah, there's a big bonus in the rules if you're firing at a tank with a base.
The higher.
I don't care if tanks are on bases or not. And no, there's no difference.
Okay then, Neil, that's all right.
Yes,
Okay.
Neil. To answer your question sensibly, you can play it with 15s, 28s, 20s, 15s. 10. If you go 10 or below, you probably want to change inches to centimeters.
Cool.
But that's the only thing you would need to do, is only on the movement. There is no aiming. There's no measuring of distance when you fire. Okay.
Yeah.
So that doesn't become part of it. The only thing I'd say on the terrain is, if in Chain of Command we encourage players to put loads and loads of terrain on their table, outhouses and picket fences, etc., etc. With What a Tanker, actually, less terrain is more helpful. The more obstacles you put in a tank action, the less easy it is to spot your opponent and engage him. So if you want to fight in the desert, with no intervening terrain, that's great. Just a blank table, bit of sand-coloured cloth. Do the Western Desert tank actions. Bang, bang, bang. 25 minutes, everybody's knocked out. Start again.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking a lot about there's a lot of run one tank or what have you. How about running an individual player running a tank squadron, for example?
Yes, definitely doable.
Is there a setup for that? Yeah.
What, a squadron? No, a tank troop.
Sorry, a troop. Yeah.
Yeah, a player could roll. A player could run 3 tanks easily.
Yeah, we've played. I mean, an awful lot of games in playtesting we played with 3 tanks. The only issue is that when I'm playing with 3 tanks, I probably care about one of those tanks and not the other 2. You just don't get that personal sort of feeling of. The great thing about playing in a multiplayer game is you think. You really connect with that tank crew because you don't want to be knocked out of the game. And whereas when you've got three tanks, you start caring about the last one.
Yeah.
But no, I mean we played loads of games where we had 3 tanks each, and it works perfectly well. It's and then when we played a lot of Eastern Front games in 15mm, where you've got the huge sort of expanse of the Russian steppes. And in those games, we had 2-3 tanks each. So in those situations, we were looking at maybe a dozen tanks a side. It's great. All I'm saying is it just... it's a bit like any game. If you and 12 mates are there and it's a Saturday and you've all taken the day off and you've got a few beers in, it's much better than if it's 2 of you sat on a Wednesday evening with a cup of cocoa. That's the only difference I would make.
I would also add there that actually if the beast from the east arrives and you can't get to your game club, actually it does work solo because you activate each tank in turn with its own unique hand of dice.
Yeah,
so it will work. It will work for solo players as well, as long as as long as you're honest about trying to have the best intentions with each tank you take on. Then it works really nicely for solo.
That's true. And actually, what we have done is in our cupboard at the community centre where our local club meets, is we put a box with 4 German tanks and 4 British tanks in. And if we get there and the guy who's meant to be doing the game has had his leg amputated or something, or his house has collapsed or whatever, we go, well, that's okay, we've got these. And the rules are so simple, we don't even need a set of rules. We just get on and play it. So it's a real pickup game, and you can throw your cloth on the table, plonk down bits of terrain in a pretty haphazard and random fashion, and get playing in 5 minutes. Well, if that much really. Once you know what your tank stats are, Bob's your uncle. You're away. True.
So, other than the usual. Tanks, terrain, table, measuring sticks and dice and stuff. Dice. What else do you need to play the game?
Not a lot, really. You just need tanks. You need your ruler. You need your dice. And we have produced a set of tokens, which allow you to track whether you've acquired your target, whether you're aimed, whether you're loaded, whether your button's up. And a universal tanking tool, which is effectively a plastic hexagon with the words "WWII Tanker" written on it, which allows you to. So, for example, A slow tank can only turn its turret 60 degrees in one activation. So you line up your hexagon with the pointy bit along the gun, and that shows you how far 60 degrees is right and how far 60 degrees is left. Whereas ordinarily, when you're buttoned up, you have a 60-degree forward vision, 30 degrees either side of the gun. So you turn your tanking tool to a manner which gives you that same lineup. So we've got a set of tokens which just make life easier. You don't need them. I mean, you can, I'm sure we can all guesstimate what 60 degrees is.
Mm.
It's it's what is it, 10 o'clock till 2 o'clock on a watch face or something.
Yeah,
it might be 11 till 1. I think it's 11 till 1, isn't it? Yeah.
No,
yeah.
It's neither. It's 9:30 to 10 to 1:30.
Right, that's it. That's fine then, Mike. Thank you for that. That
Make it
really
a lot
clarifies things. Yeah.
that's okay. Are we sure it's not 9:35?
it only if it's digital.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. And when the clocks go back, do we?
Who knows? But the other thing, Mike, though, that you will need is, I think Richard might have alluded to it. You'll need a dashboard, which is we've got examples of these in the rules. It's just really something where you can keep track of what's what with your tank. So as you take permanent damage, you can mark off what that is that damage is. So, for instance, you might get -1 on your firing. For instance, you just need a way of tracking that. You can use a scrap of paper, or you can use the nice example dashboard that we've got in the rules. There's somewhere to put your temporary damage dice. So as your tank takes damage, and you lose your permanent dice, you can throw those in the bin. But but your temporary dice that you might be able to recover if you're lucky enough in your next roll to be able to do that, you need to hold your temporary dice somewhere. So I think in the ideal world, a tank would have a dashboard that would go with it.
And that's going to be available for people to print out. So you can just print them out, and you've got that. The temporary dice. I mean, I call it the sin bin. You put your dice in that, and as you claim them back, you just move them over to a different part of that template. But the whole idea has been, we do not want to produce hundreds of different supplements for this. We're not trying to rob people blind. We're trying to produce a decent set of rules, a reasonable price, with a set of tokens that do everything you need. And the set of tokens that we've got will cover 6 tanks, 3 tanks aside. Obviously you don't need them if you don't want to buy them, but I mean, they do help. But the idea is that the whole thing is cheap and cheerful, and there is a game that is, they're ready to play without the need for any supplements or any ancillary bits and pieces.
So the $65,000 question is, when's it out? And where can we get it from?
Well, you can buy it from me. Too Fat Lardies, www.toofatlardies.co.uk. What we're going to do is, as always with these things, we're just getting it ready for the printer. What we do is, once we have the printer's proofs back and we're happy with them, we then say, right, we're happy, press the button, Jim the printer presses the button, and the presses start rolling, and then we know it can't be stopped. And at that point in time, we will start taking advanced orders. And the advanced order will be a really good deal, which will get you the hard copy, the tokens, free PDF, and it will save you a few quid. And then, obviously, once everything's released, it will be available in every decent Wargames shop on the planet. And that's the measure by which you can judge them. Release date, first week in April.
Oh, Easter then?
No, before Easter.
Just typical.
I don't know when Easter is. I'm sorry. It's ages.
Easter
before.
Sunday is April the 1st, mate.
Oh no.
Well, maybe we'll actually hit an Easter release date. Who knows?
We
For the
don't
first
need
time
to-
ever.
Well, you are, because I'm sure as hell not.
Well, yeah, exactly, Mr. Whittaker. We won't even talk about that. But we'll Easter. Good Lord, no, surely not.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Easter Sunday is April the 1st.
Okay, well, we'll have to delay it then, because we can't possibly hit Easter, can we? within that week. That would be ridiculous to hit an Easter target. But yeah, so it's that'll be that. We'll be showing it off at Salute. But what I will say is you will get a better deal if you order in advance. So order in advance.
There you go. You've been told.
Come and play it at Salute.
Come and play it. It's
Order it first and then play it.
and then play it. Yeah. Well, it's going to be good. There's no point. Why would you not order it? Because you know it's going to be good.
I'm ordering it.
Come
Of
on
course.
and play. Yeah.
Of course, I'm sure it's going to be. I'm sure it's going to be far better than that other tank game that I played. That the Gale Force 9 X-wing variant that we had.
The one about which we had many arguments. You mean?
Yes, that one.
Oh, I missed that. I've no idea. I've not played that really. It was funny actually talking about X-wing and aerial stuff. Somebody did on Facebook. They said, "Oh no, it wasn't on Facebook. It was on the Beasts of War page." They said, "What's a tanker?" They said, "When is the World War I aerial supplement going to follow up? What a fucker!"
That's back up.
And what is the answer to that?
I actually phoned up Nick and I said, "There's an idea there."
Well, let me just say that when I was playtesting this in Christmas 2016, it wasn't tanks that I had in mind initially. So the processes of this are somewhere deep in there, and they will re-emerge, I think, somewhere else. But I'm not going to say where because I don't know.
Boat switch, Nick. Is it boats?
No comment. No comment. Mate.
Planes. Is it planes, Nick?
No comment.
Is it half tracks?
I won't be drawn on it.
Is it a film?
It's
2 words.
3 words. Sounds like.
You just hope that that particular commenter has not copyrighted that title.
Yeah, quite. But no, I mean, to be fair, I mean we already have our own World War I aerial rules with a ridiculous title. It would be foolish to have 2 ridiculous titles.
Yes, and you'll notice we've reverted to ridiculous titles for What a Tanker as well. We've gone back to the kind of tongue in the cheek, or not even in the cheek. For it, we have various ideas of what we would call it, something rather more serious and Hollywood.
We were talking about Tank Commander or Panzer Ace, and you think, you think whatever you can't say on this show, and you think, no, What a Tanker is what it should be called, because it's just good fun, and sometimes there's something wholeheartedly good fun about a stupid title, and if people say, "I'm not playing that rules because it's ridiculous name," well, they're missing out.
Exactly. They can go and shove What a Tanker where the sun doesn't shine.
I would say What a Tanker to them.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think, guys? I mean, seriously, it's a serious question, because I mean, we have over the years. It's interesting, actually. Well, maybe not that interesting to anybody other than me, but we used to have a reputation for having silly names, and then all of a sudden our reputation went, "Oh, they're far too historically snobbish," and you think, well, that's interesting to jump from one to the other. But is calling it something like that? It's a rhetorical question, to be honest with you. You don't have to answer it.
I was about to say, because you're not going to change it, are you?
No, I'm pretty proud of that. I think it's great, and I think it looks and I think it looks great. And when you read it on the cover, it's pretty obvious that the comment I'm making about that evil Nazi in his tank is exactly what I think of him.
Yeah. Well, I think that what I think, Rich, is you've built your reputation over the years, and people now know and respect the Too Fat Lardies name. Your reputation has grown over the years. People know that you put a lot of effort into historical accuracy and you produce some damn fine rules. But people also know that you've got a sense of humour, and that comes across. And I think if you turned around and produced a light-hearted game like What a Tanker is, and gave it a really poncy name, like, Whitman's Revenge or something stupid like that.
Oh, that would have been good. Let me write that down.
Yeah, write that one down.
We've still got time to change that. Richard.
Well, I was actually thinking of Barkman Corner Overdrive.
Oh,
I'm so nicking that for an
Subline, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, in short, Call of Water Tanker, it's a fun game. It's from the Lardy stable.
Yeah.
People are going to know it's good. And that's what's important.
Yeah.
And
And as you say, with what you've been saying about, what the game is aimed at, calling it a serious title, would almost do the game a little bit of disservice. And plus the fact, looking at the cover design, it's somewhat reminiscent of like the Commando comics or that sort of thing, and it's like it just fits.
It is a Commando comic design. I mean, it isn't a Commando comic design. I did it, but it was designed to replicate Commando comics, and it does fit. Yeah, I hope that people. It was interesting. Funnily enough, I mean, that is the second cover image because we had some issues that in the first one. What I did was the text is black with a pink trim to replicate the Waffenfarbe of the German Tank Corps, and to really highlight that, we used the skull and crossbones of the German Army Tank Corps, and we had a number of people say, "Oh, blimey, that's a bit worryingly SS." And you think, well, that's funny actually, because we've just done a podcast about this. But ultimately, it wasn't SS. But so we have dropped that. So, but nevertheless, we've got the black and the pink, which is obviously very much reminiscent of those, the German tank crew, and of course the guy in the picture is German. But the whole thing is very much the whole cover is very much attempting to do that Commando comic look, and I think it looks great. I'm really pleased with it, and I think it complements the game perfectly.
I love it.
Yeah. Nice to hear. Hopefully that wasn't Nick saying that.
No. It looks good. I think it's one of the nicest looking sets of rules that's rolled out of the production line. Yeah, it's quite smooth and sleek looking, and that certainly helps. I just wanted to share one thing actually about the rules. When we played it, Rich, you remember this? We had one of the guys come to Lard Island the other day, and I kind of hesitate this because it's a kind of sounds like we're blowing our own trumpet. But he played Water Tanker. He'd never played it before, and we played it for an hour or so. And he sat there and he just said, "Bloody hell, guys, this is the best game I've ever played." And this is a guy who's been around the track a few times, and to hear that from him was really kind of proof that we're actually on something really quite nice here. So it's lovely to hear that, and thank you to him for that.
He was very, very,
very drunk. No, for once he wasn't. But it's great to hear. So, the feedback's been good. I just hope that other people, when they get to play it, enjoy it as well.
Well, you've got to take it in the spirit, haven't you?
I'm really, really looking forward to it. As I say, Tank on Tank Combat. I was so disappointed by the previous effort that I have seen on that. So
he's so disappointed, but he can't actually bring himself to say its name.
Yeah, tanks. Yeah. Oh.
Well,
anyway, so I am really stoked and looking forward to Water Tanker. Especially since actually I haven't had a chance to play it yet.
No, exactly. Well, we've kept it away from you because you might say horrible things about it, as well as boycotting us off your show.
That would never happen, mate, because Neil would be outnumbered 2-1.
No, you will. We'll be bringing it along to OML 6.
Oh, cool.
So that'll be good. That'll be good fun.
Excellent. Okay, so that's Water Tanker. What is this nasty rumour that you've been playing with pixies?
At least they're not space pixies.
Well, who is that?
No, I've merely been observing other people playing with pixies. To be honest with you, and it's what happened was one day I was moving through beautiful green countryside, and there I was with a little man. I met a little man with big woolly feet who was smoking a pipe outside his home in a little valley.
Hi, Aid.
No, it's you. You.
Look at that, Obsy. If you don't recognise the description of you by now, I mean, come on.
I've had my feet shaken the other day.
It was that Welsh Gandalf. It was Harry from Barry. It was the Druid from Clwyd. So we Bill from Rill. Yeah, let's not forget it. Yeah, so we're working on that, which is really interesting. And apart from the fact I feel really bad because I was meant to meet the lads this last weekend that's just gone, but couldn't get it because my wife had the flu. And I felt bad because I had to obviously stay and look after her when we had a really exciting day of gaming lined up, but more importantly, loads of beer and curry, which I was really looking forward to. Mick and I have been so immersed into doing all the layout and whatever for What a Tanker. It really is sort of 18-hour days and getting it all done. And I thought, great, I'm off to Evesham. I can absolutely get blasted out of my mind on cheap cooking lager, and I couldn't get there, so it was sad. But there we are. I did, at least, Mike, have a joint of Welsh lamb, which I cooked for my wife to try and entice her into eating in a poorly state, and she said, "No, I can't eat." So I actually managed to eat the whole lot myself. So that was in some respects, it was a really good weekend.
Yeah. I think we should stress, actually, that this isn't actually my idea. This is Jim and Aid's idea, and I'm just a secretary. So I'm just the person who might
in many ways, I see Jim and Aid as sort of Bilbo and Frodo, so living a perfectly normal life, carrying on in their little house under the hill. And then one day, a wandering wizard from Wales walks in and awakens them to what they've only been dreaming of. So I think maybe whilst they might be the guys with the ideas, you are the catalyst that has allowed it to happen.
I was going with interpreter, actually.
Well, that's an interesting concept. But yeah, exciting stuff. I mean, really, what is it? What we like? Sobriquets of the kleptomaniacs.
Yeah, that's the latest one.
That's the latest one. A really, really interesting project to be involved in. I, many years ago, spent a lot of time being very interested in Lord of the Rings, and I collected a huge selection of figures from the old Citadel ranges. Fabulous stuff. And I made the foolish error of leaving my house where I lived and letting that out to become a publican, taking on a public house, which would probably surprise nobody. And lending a friend of mine, or not lending, asking him to look after a very large selection of figures, which, funnily enough, when I left the public house 4 years later, have never re-emerged. Which is a shame, because they were some, I'm sure they'll be collector's pieces now. But I invented a whole world, and one of the most enjoyable things about doing that sort of fancy thing was to invent this world, which we never actually got to use. So the guys came over and we said, well, let's, look at what we're doing. And I said, well, I'd really love to be, and I'm not really interested in helping you develop the rules because you guys understand pixies better than I do. But I'd be really interested in working with you to develop a kind of world which is Tolkien-esque, which I would feel really comfortable with having a set of rules set in. And I was due to go and unveil all these maps that I'd drawn up and whatever. But sadly, my wife ruined my life. Not for the first time, or the last, I'm sure. We'll get round to it, lads. And interesting stuff. Interesting to be involved in something that's so different.
Yeah.
And obviously, we'll speak a lot more about that in the coming months as things progress and it gets nearer to publication. Well, I hope so. Anyway.
Well, let me just say, I think something like that is an evolutionary process. I mean, any rule writing is evolutionary, and when you're taking something and developing a set of rules for World War II, you're trying to get a set of rules that match what happened in World War II. When you're developing a set of rules in a fantasy setting, you also need to evolve the world in which that game exists. So it's actually a more complex process and procedure. Obviously, one takes a lead from history. Certainly, the human aspect of the world is Norse in one respect, but also Germanic in another respect. That you've got lots of principalities, duchies, and it very much looks like a map of Germany before Germany existed. So 1700s, 1600s, 30 years war, if you like. So loads and loads of tiny principalities, or duchies in this case. But, you've got to develop all that, and it has to be plausible. There has to be a reason why these people are not best friends with them, and why they are fighting with them, and why the elves are involved here and not involved there, and why the dwarves don't like these people. And you can't take that directly from Tolkien. Well, you could, I suppose, but the part of the fun is to create your own world, and it has to be, but it also has to be pragmatic and sensible. Otherwise, it's just daft. Developing that backdrop and that backstory has to work as well. I mean, for example, we've got a situation in which the orcs actually are the unwanted love child of the elves, if you like. So the orcs have gone, oh my God, you don't love us, and we go off and do our own thing. And in many ways, they're a bit of a tribal crowd, but they're also Barbary pirates. Whereas the other groups are more different in other respects. So you've got things like the goblins, who are just downright blooming evil, just horrible, which orcs aren't. So it's a slightly different world to other people's world. And the reason that the orcs are horrible is because of their history. So, sorry, the goblins are horrible is because of their history. And that's fun, but it all needs developing at the same time as the rules need developing, because you've got to present people with not just a game, but also a plausible world setting within which to play their games.
And I would say hats off to the guys for that, because actually if you're working on a historic rule set, you don't need to worry about the backstory. The backstory is already there. The backstory is the backbone, in fact, that you're going to build everything upon. Whereas with these guys and this fantasy world, they've got to build all that. They've got to make me understand why it is that these monsters exist and what.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm not a fantasy gamer. I've never really had any background in fantasy games, and I enjoyed it hugely when we got to play with some monsters earlier in the year. While they were unraveling some ideas. So I think they're making huge steps, and there's going to be a really good fun set of rules. I think you'll be looking forward to it, guys.
Yeah, it's coming on. I mean, it's been really good fun. I just look at the rules, and this is probably where it's quite good, because Richard, Jim, and they are probably looking at the world history more than I do. I just look at the pure mechanics, and
I just look at the monsters.
Yeah. I mean, I just think, what big monster can I give Nick?
Yeah,
he's already got one.
Yeah, so
he's downstairs watching the telly.
Yeah. So I sort of approach everything very generically, and I think, like, this rule has to work for everything.
Yeah.
And then we sort of, but you still have this background which is hanging over you, but you still need to make the rules so that people who don't want to use the background that we're going to provide can use the rules as a toolkit to create their own fantasy. So we're not trying to sort of tie it into, this is just how orcs will work.
Oh no, absolutely right. Yeah. It's got to be a toolkit, so that if you want to be able to create your own world, what we intend to do is offer our view of the fantasy world. But you know, if you want to have men, half llama, who ride about using umbrellas as their primary method of attack, then you can do it, because there's a toolkit in there for doing that. But I do think one of the joys of it is, for me as a game designer, one of the great pleasures is actually to go through the design process of any set of rules, but actually to get an opportunity to create a whole world. Wow, that's so. Well, it's unique, really. It's just great fun and really interesting. And you know, I think my deep and honest interest in history helps me in that in trying to make the world that I'm creating plausible. I mean, I hope so.
Yeah, and by having that sort of backstory in there, it allows us then to create army lists that we can put into the rules and into campaigns, and it just gives us a whole foundation for building upon that.
Yeah,
I mean, want to use it, they don't have to. But
one of the army lists that I really fancy running are the traders who go from the great river that runs across the middle up to supply the dwarves. And then at whatever they can't remember the name of the gate that they have into their mountains. But there are these traders who supply them with everything they want, because I mean obviously dwarves don't have access to Sauvignon Blanc and smoked salmon. So there are traders who do very nicely about going up into the mountains to deal with that. And the idea that they have their own little army of mercenaries, I think it's a fantastic little force for a game. You know, they could be hiring a dwarf from the over the mountains, and sorry, not a dwarf. Sorry, Mike, I'm thinking of you. They could be hiring a giant from over the mountains, and he's the centre of their force. They've got this effectively a giant thug who's there to put everybody off. But maybe they've got a sort of little dodgy magician who knows a little bit and can do a few tiny spells that will put the enemy off. It's just so much fun that can be had there.
Yeah, and you can use any figures you want. That's the thing. You can literally go from Dark Age figures up to Renaissance.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, some of those, some of the Renaissance Swiss Landsknecht pikemen, they'd be perfect, wouldn't they? Look absolutely beautiful. Yeah. No, it's an interesting project, really, and one that I'm really enjoying because it's so different.
Best to get on with it then.
Well, no, you can't rush things. Like a decent bottle of wine, it needs to be, time needs to be taken.
Can of cooking lager.
Yeah.
I like cooking lager, absolutely.
Easy will be fine.
So obviously, Water Tankers due for print. We've obviously got whatever it's called this week.
Swinging with the Crankies.
Yeah, well, yes, the crank, something of the Crankies always kind of sticks in my head. So yeah,
David does it.
And that's coming up. So, is there anything else currently happening in Lard Island? Anything bubbling under? Anything coming to fruition? And dare I ask, Nick, how's Kiss Me Hardy 2 coming on?
I was waiting for that. I was just about to press the hang up button.
Phew.
Easter. No, it's a project. It's a project that we keep going back to, and eventually we will go back to it, and it will lay the golden egg. But not this week.
These are all pots that hang over the fire, and you regularly have to lift the lid and see if it's boiling. And if it's not, you leave it, and one day it boils, and that's when you get on board.
Mm-hmm. So, Mike, your turn.
I was afraid you were coming to
that. But you've had the last 2 months off.
Well, no, I've had the last 2 months largely ritual sympathised with this one, dealing with builders.
Oh, good Lord. Yeah, I will sympathise.
The outside workshop, which is going to become my office, given the new job will be working from home, is currently in the process of, well, it's had its floor reduced from 3 levels to 1. The windows went in today. We're about a week from finished. Unfortunately, when what you really want to do is get your head down and focus on writing something, having to sort of process interruptions every hour doesn't lead to getting the stuff I want to get finished. My current aim is I want to get the writing finished by Salute for the Dutch Brick Compendium. And then I guess Rich and I will sit down and talk about what happens to it next.
Yeah, definitely. Honestly,
I figure that having got to this point, I'll let you guys have Easter for what I take.
Yeah. I recall talking about the building thing. I first thought about chain of command while the builders were here doing the big extension we had in Lard Island, which includes the sort of office area that I'm in now. And I remember thinking, I can't wait to get this on the tabletop. All my figures are in storage, everything's in storage. And it's so frustrating because it's you're effectively living in chaos. But, yeah. So I do
try to run. I haven't been shop room scenarios at the club and going, right, where are my British?
Yeah. No,
to which the answer was behind a pile of windows, apparently.
No.
So yes, to answer your question, Hobbsy, it is on its way. It has had a bit of a delay, but we're nearly done, so I'm aiming to get down to it.
That'll be good, though, won't it?
And I've just discovered, for those who will follow me on Twitter, a couple of interesting books for some reference reading, which is keeping me a mischief at the moment. I know a lot of people have recommended Guy What's-His-Face's thing. Damn, what is the man's name?
Nobody's coming to your help, Mike.
Yes, I've noticed that.
What is it?
Guy Halsall.
Oh, Guy Halsall, yeah, right.
Yes,
yeah.
Careful. But there's an interesting book by Jim Storr called King Arthur's Wars, which came out in 2016. Some of the historians...
Sorry, what has Guy Halsall done now? I'm sorry, I'm not up to date with that.
No, he's... it's been suggested that I read his thing on Arthur for all...
Oh, yeah, really good. Really good. My daughter went to York, did history at York, and she was really impressed with Guy Halsall. Really impressed.
But a chap called Jim Storr in 2016, which was obviously after you wrote Dux Brit, came out with this book called King Arthur's Wars, which is looking at the departure of the Romans and the Anglo-Saxon conquest from a more soldier's perspective. And I'm about 3 chapters in. Definitely interesting. Probably one of those that you want to read with a pinch of salt, with several others taking opposite points of view as well, and combine what you get out of it. But definitely worth. He's got a lot of interesting views on how wars were fought and where the defences were in various provinces and things like that. And I'm just digging deeper in that.
I'd be really, really interested in that. Yeah. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll contact you at the end of the show because
find my Twitter feed. It's on there.
Yeah. Okay. Good. That sounds interesting. I mean, funnily enough, we've just ordered another reprint of Dux and another reprint of Dux cards, which is a real commitment to the rules because getting cards reprinted is effectively like getting divorced in terms of cost implications. Yeah. It's I've been amazed. It's funny actually how some things work. When we first produced Kriegspiel, it almost bankrupted me, but over time it's done well. When we first produced Charlie Don't Surf, it almost sold none, but over the years it's become one of our biggest sellers. And Dux Britanniarum, it just keeps on going. It's such a hugely popular set of rules, and I find that all the more remarkable because Saga is obviously the big trendy set out there, but we cannot stop selling Dux Britanniarum.
I still reckon that's as much to do with the narrative element in the campaign as anything.
Yeah, probably so. I mean,
I may be slightly biased in this, but
yeah, but I do think that the campaign narrative is really important, and I also think that actually that if you present a narrow focus and do one small period well, you can't necessarily apply that across a broad spectrum. So, for example, the campaign system in Dux Britanniarum is very much about the world of 400 to 500, or maybe 600. You couldn't extend it through the heptocracy, or you couldn't extend it into Danegeld or whatever. Well, you could, but you'd need to write a separate set of rules. So I think one of the reasons it works is it is very much focused on the battles of Arthur.
Quite agree.
Cool. So, you kind of hinted earlier that one thing you were looking at next are these companions for Chain of Command.
Yeah.
So what have we got planned there?
Just rolling out really the whole war. I mean, the first one is going to be 1940, which as I've said is, Blitzkrieg in the west. Next one is going to be Blitzkrieg in the east, which is going to be Barbarossa, Finland, all the way to Stalingrad. And then after that is going to be the Far East. Specifically, I think the Commonwealth involvement in the Far East, so Hong Kong, Singapore, Burma. I am working very carefully and closely with a guy called Len Tracy, who was the commanding officer of the Australian Army's Jungle Warfare Training School up in the far north of Cairns in Australia. And he is a guy who really is very, very knowledgeable on the subject of the Second World War there and the Japanese Army. Len is in contact with a lot of Japanese veterans, and also obviously Australian veterans, which is important because I think it's all too easy to just lump Australians into the sort of pot with Commonwealth of British troops. So we're going to look at that as the third one. After that, on we go to, I don't know, probably mid-war Kursk, Eastern Front, and then blah, blah, blah. It all gets a bit vague, to be honest with you. What we intend to do is roll out the whole war. And what it's going to do is present, as I was saying earlier, some, more variety in terms of unit types, and also some period theatre specific rules for the way things work. For example, in the 1941, we've got things like the fifth column. Now, were the fifth column there? Well, yeah, they were, but were the Allied forces obsessed about them? Well, definitely they were obsessed about them. So, the concept of nuns with guns becomes is slightly farcical, but ultimately, how are you going to deal with that column of refugees? I think that becomes quite important in the 1940 game when your objective is to detonate the charges under the bridge, stop the Germans coming. Well, what do you do if you've got civilians on it? It's not necessarily, I guess that's not going to be the whole focus of what goes on in 1940, but there are lots of specific issues that you have to address to make the game more plausible for that period. So another example is dodgy allies. So, and I'm not just talking about, British troops being allied to French troops and the French troops disappearing. I'm talking the other way around as well. On the basis you read so many historical accounts, British diaries saying, we were there on the canal line, and then when we went to the left, the French weren't there. They'd gone. Blimmin' heck, how terrible, what rotters. But equally, you then read another British diary, they go, we got orders to pull out. And you think, right, okay, so really, whoever's next to you, if they're not from your battalion, they are unreliable allies. So just adding some issues in there, so you think, right, well, I think I know what's happening on my left, but I'm not quite sure. When you're trying to replicate or reflect the total collapse that was happening in May 1940, it's important to add these things in. And if nothing else, they make it a bit more fun, a bit more interesting.
Well, Nick, Rich, it has been evident as I've been sat here chatting and listening to you, it's been far too long since we've had you on. I don't know about anybody else. I've had a blast chatting with you guys. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Want to wish you all the best with WWII Tanker. I'm really looking forward to that game because I want to play a decent tank combat game, and that seems to really fit the bill. So I'm really looking forward to that. So thank you both for coming on and sharing that with us. And as always, it sounds like you've got an awful lot of stuff on, and your diary is fairly full on what you're going to be producing.
Yeah, we're just having fun, really. Just concentrating on having fun with our gaming, aren't we, Nick? I mean, it's just we've got lots of Lardy Games days coming up. We've got, we're trying to get ourselves, we're trying to balance ourselves between the Lardy Games days and the show circuit. So we're
don't forget Posh Lard this year.
I haven't forgotten it, mate, but I'm on holiday.
Oh no!
Yeah, honestly,
Nick.
But, yeah. No, it can't. I thought you said it was Posh Lard. Why are you inviting him?
Cutting.
I'm assuming that in 5 minutes' time, when we finish the podcast, that Richard's going to shut the door on the cell again, and I'll be locked away for another.
No, that's
years.
right.
It's okay for you guys,
Get back in the cellar.
Yeah, just think. Imagine what your life would be like if you were the guy who had to game with Richard Clarke every week. It's hell, guys.
Yeah.
And, you need to come and rescue me more often. So a trip to Posh Lard would be a lovely way to get out and about, and maybe slip the shackles and get away from the electronic tag.
Well, the thing is, Nick, you have to come back on your own because you haven't actually done your gaming background piece yet. So,
well, you could answer us on a postcard. My gaming background is entirely predictable. So if you've listened to this podcast and you've listened to the gaming background of other gamers, you could probably write mine. But I'm very happy to come back and share it with you at some point in the future.
Well, as soon as you finish me, Hardy, you can come back on.
Make a date for 2022 then, shall we?
Hey, Hobbs. I remember you talking to Mr. Skinner about, you should really do a new version of this when you were playing it at
OML4.
OML2, I think, wasn't it?
Something like that. That wasn't so much as a gentle nudge as an electric cattle prod applied to the most sensitive areas, wasn't it?
Well, it would need it, and it's a great fun game and period to play. So I'd love to revisit it and push something else out for sure.
Brilliant stuff. Well, guys, it has been fantastic to have you on, and let's not leave this long next time. So all that's left to say is thank you for joining us, to Nick and Richard.
That other bloke.
Yeah. And thank you to everyone for listening. We hope you've enjoyed this Lardy special edition of the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. All that remains to be said is thank you to our resident bard and nay troubadour, Mr. Whittaker. Thank you for joining us, sir.
You're welcome, as ever.
Good, and back to writing.
Yes, master. Meanwhile, roll good dice, guys.
And thank you, as always, to the Welsh wizard himself, Mr. Michael Hobbs. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you all. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Mike. Thank you to the Meeps. My darling little Meeps.
Do you think this is an Oscar?
Yes.
I
want to thank God for giving me this gift.
Gift you something. Yeah. And on that note, thank you for listening. Happy gaming, and we will talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Where's Roger?
Dun, 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 dun.
Thank you for listening to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, why not share it with others by leaving us a review on iTunes? And if you have any comments or questions, you can always email the show. The address is info@meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. And you can also visit our webpage, where you'll find a complete episode archive, all the View from the Veranda podcasts, rules reviews, and our blog of hobby items and news, which is updated several times a week. This is also where you'll find the links to our presence on social media, and here you can follow us on Twitter or join our Facebook group. And finally, here you can also find details should you wish to support us by making a donation to the podcast. All this on the Meeples and Miniatures website, www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 3.0 Unported license. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.